Hi guys, welcome. Danny here from the Magic Junk Drawer. So since today is September 11th, I figured it's the 18th as to where I was when I found out about the attack. Because I've seen a lot of this like on Instagram and other people putting up their stories. And it's true, and we knew it at the time that at the moment that it happened, we would all remember where we were and what we were doing at the moment it occurred. So it was 18 years ago, and I don't live far from New York City. I'm probably about 20 minutes to a half hour away from the city. So this hit really close to home where we were, where we lived in this town. Even though we're a small town, there are a lot of people that lived here or in this area that were firemen and police officers that worked in the city. So it was What I didn't remember was the day of the week it was. I looked it up and it was a Tuesday. For some reason, I thought that it was a Wednesday. I don't know why, but that's what I remembered. Um, I was at this time working full time doing accounting for a private company in the area, and at night I was at A&P. So I remember, I remember what I was wearing too. It's the kind of thing that you just don't forget. I was wearing a purple tank top with a purple sweater over it and a tie-dyed blue and purple skirt. That's what I was wearing. And I was already in my office and I had already started work. And one of my coworkers from a different department came in and he said to me, a plane just hit one of the Twin Towers. And I remember saying to him, what was it, engine failure? And he was like, yeah, it must have been some kind of an accident. Because nobody would have dreamed that it was what happened. Like we just didn't think that. So it wasn't it wasn't long before the first plane hit that the second plane hit. And we didn't have TVs in our office, but the shop had a TV, so they had the news on. So we were all able to go into the shop and see it on the news. And I remember that day I had to go and do the bank run. So in the accounting office, every day one of us had to physically take the checks to the bank. This is way back before we had a better system, or way back before they did things like, I guess, auto withdraw and that kind of stuff. Somebody had to mail in a check and we had to physically go to the bank. So I was doing the bank run and I remember just not wanting to be alone. Like I didn't want to make the drive alone. Not that it was far, but I just didn't. I wanted to stay in the office. I just wanted to be around people. And I remember it was just such a creepy feeling that whole day. Like we were not knowing what was going to happen next. The two planes hit, and then the Pentagon, and then a plane that was taken down by the passengers happened. So we were afraid as to what was going to happen next. And I remember them talking about the Sears Tower in Chicago or Illinois. They were worried about that. So, anyhow, that night when I came home, for weeks, it was all that was on the news, any channel. You couldn't get anything else. So the news was on here, and at the time, I was hanging out a lot at this local bar not far from my house. So for the next couple of weeks, when I wasn't at work, I was at the bar because I just didn't want to be alone. And it's not like me to not want to be alone, but I was just not feeling it at that point. And a lot of my friends are firemen and EMTs and police officers in the city. And physically, everyone was okay. But nobody that I knew was in the towers that day or near the towers. But all of them had to work like unlimited overtime for the next couple of weeks. And oftentimes, after they got out of their shift, they would come by the bar and they would tell us what was going on. So we really did hear firsthand, what they saw and what was happening. And people like New Yorkers who were civilians were very eager to help. Even if they weren't physically helping with the cleanup efforts, a lot of people would be making food and distributing beverages, making sure that these people always had something to eat, or letting them use their bathrooms and things like that. Like just keeping things as easy for them as possible. So I remember that. And I remember um, I just spent a lot of weeks just either at work or at the bar because I didn't want to be home alone. And eventually the shifts went back to normal for everybody. But there's a lot of talk now about the physical effects it would have had on all of their bodies from being it with all that like the all the debris and all of the stuff that was in the air. So, it's not something that you will ever forget. And I remember like people saying that to me about when like Kennedy was shot or when Ronald Reagan was shot or when John Lennon died. I'll never forget where I was when I heard the news. Well, this was the same thing for us. None of us will forget where we were when we heard the news. It is especially hit really close to home because we're so close to the city. And and most people, I don't like crowds, so I don't do it. But most people from here that go into the city religiously, especially at the time to see the Christmas tree. And um, to me, I'm like, you've seen one Christmas tree, you've seen them all. But it was a lot. I've worked with a lot of people that lost relatives and friends, either that because they were in the towers, working in the towers, or because they were a rescuer. And it's not something that you ever forget. And then it's so ironic. It's like how everything else is. My grandmother really did not want my cousin to he wound up becoming a fireman. Like that's what he wanted to do. And this was after 9/11. I think he went into the EMT academy first and he worked at EMT for a few years and then he became a fireman. But she was so against him becoming any kind of service like that because she thought that it was dangerous. But meanwhile, all of these people that had corporate jobs that were working in the Twin Towers, they didn't choose jobs that were dangerous and they were killed anyway. So I guess it all really comes down to fate. It's the same thing like with anything else. Like you could, I don't know, be a smoker like George Burns for 100 years and live to be 102 or however old he was and drink whiskey every day. Or you can die young like my mom did at 50 because she was a smoker and drank black coffee all day. So I guess it all comes down to faith and fate, both of them. What you believe and the fate of your journey. So it's been very interesting. You know, oh, Dylan. It's almost 20 years now, and it's hard to believe that time has gone so fast. But that's one thing about time, it stops for no one. So that's another reason why when all of these people, especially in the live chats, are like waiting to hear from people, I'm like, you know what? Life is just too short to sit around and wait. If there's somebody that you want to talk to, just reach out to them. The worst that's going to happen is they're not going to answer you. Or the worst that's going to happen is they're going to be nasty or something. But you know what? Chances are they're not going to be. Chances are you're going to get what you want. So it's always something to think about. And I think that a lot of times, it takes tragedies like this to bring people together. Like, New Yorkers are tough people. Sometimes, they can let the door slam you in the face. It's happened before. But after 9/11, everybody was really eager to help. So it definitely did pull New Yorkers together. Such a shitty tragedy. But anyhow, we will never forget that day. Anyone that lived through it. And it's hard to believe that the kids that are going to be graduating high school this year won't remember it or didn't live through it or they were just born. That's pretty wild because it seems like yesterday it happened. All right, guys, that's my story. Feel free to comment below with your stories if you remember where you were when you heard. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.